The statue of ex-mayor Orville Hubbard, known for his racially divisive views when he led the city for 36 years, was taken down from in front of City Hall. Compared to the Confederate flag debate in the South this summer, Dearborn residents called for it to be removed, and it will now have a home at the Dearborn Historical Museum. This was interesting to watch this week. Stephen, I'm going to start with you because I actually heard on, you guys were talking about it on your radio show on Detroit Today on WDET, and you got some pretty interesting callers. And what were some of the feelings, I think, from people in Dearborn when this happened?
Well, I mean, I think they're of mixed feelings, and let's be clear, Orville Hubbard is a person with a mixed history, as most people are. He was, by most accounts, a very good mayor, ran the city very efficiently, as Bill McGraw, who was the guest on that segment, pointed out. Coleman Young used to praise Orville Hubbard for the way he ran Dearborn, the way he managed the city. But at the same time, this was somebody who had really awful racist views as a person, and used those views to shape policy in what was the largest suburb in the metro area for a very long time. And so, I think the question here is always about context. How do we tell the story of who Orville Hubbard is? Is it just with a statue that makes him look like a general or a president, or is it in a museum where you can deal with his accomplishments and deal with his foibles? And I think that's what people in Dearborn who are calling the show really want, is they want to be able to be honest about what this was and sort of put it behind them, which I think having the statue out in front of City Hall didn't allow.
Are we able to put things in context now, Nolan?
I think the way Dearborn handled this was the way they should be. They recognized that there's mixed feelings about Orville Hubbard and that his record was mixed. He did build a great city. I mean, he exploited this gold mine he had in Ford Motor Company. Sure. For the benefit of his residents. They had, middle-class people had sort of country club parks, and it was a great city. It's still a great city, and the people of Dearborn resolved this in a way that everyone could live with. I mean, they resolved it in the least divisive way, in a way that shouldn't generate resentment. And I think that should be the goal here, and they've pulled it off. I covered Hubbard as a young reporter, and he was
well, how did he treat you? Did he yell at you, Nolan?
No, no, that would have been Coleman Young. No, Hubbard was extraordinarily charming, old school politician, truly larger than life. And a lot of people still in Dearborn remember him as sort of the father of the city. So
we mentioned his name when we were talking about the Confederate flag issues down south when that cropped up this summer, and we were talking about Kid Rock and whatnot. So are there any other things in Southeast Michigan, in the metro area? Are there any more statues? Are there any more figures that need to be addressed like this?
Well, I mean, I think whether they need to be addressed is one thing. I think a separate question is, do we have other things that fall in this category? And that's an unequivocal yes. Cobo Hall, that was one of the examples that Bill McGraw pointed out on the show, named for a mayor who was also a notorious racist, who was responsible for some of the really awful segregationist policies in the city before Jerry Kavanaugh was mayor. I mean, it depends on how far you want to push this stuff. We have streets named for slaveholders in the metro area. Are those worth thinking about, talking about, putting in some context? Maybe. I think at some point, this country still has a whole lot of reckoning to do with awful things that were done in the past and the vestiges of those things that we see around us today. I don't see a problem with doing it. I don't think it has to be an accusatory or a finger-pointing kind of exercise. It can be an effort to get people to understand that these things happen and that they had consequences.
Well, I think you start stripping George Washington's name off cities and streets,
taking off,
and Jefferson's, you're going to rip this country right apart. And I think that's the lesson we should take from Dearborn. They did it in a way that didn't breed the sort of resentment and hostility. Right. A city that has admirably, I mean, Dearborn has admirably handled its transitioning, its integration. They're doing well there. I mean, it's still a remarkable community, as it has been through much of its history.
All right, we just have a couple of minutes left on the show, guys, and two things I want to throw out there that I kind of want to watch for in this next week or so. Taking a look at Macomb County and the lawsuit that they're facing in terms of they had an inmate in their jail system that was suffering from mental illness, and the family is accusing the jail of essentially not getting his meds to him, and so he went in withdrawal and he died while he was in custody. And Macomb County's looking, and specifically Mark Hackle, the county executive, and talking about these jails the way we have the system right now. They're not equipped to deal with the amount of mentally challenged and mentally ill people that are coming into the system, and also people who have substance abuse problems. And so, Nolan, I know that you're also keeping an eye on that as well. I mean, that's a larger issue, I think, that we're facing in prison systems as well.
Well, I mean, there's a much bigger issue here, and I would invite you to read. Caitlin Buss had a column in our paper today about the pay-to-stay policy. It's unconstitutional. And to say to folks, well, gosh, you've got to pay this traffic fine or we're going to lock you up, that's against federal law. That's what it is. And it's against federal law and it's against state law, and yet it still continues in many Michigan communities. And that, I think, is the bigger issue here. People who can't pay a fine, do you lock them up or do you find some alternative means of punishment? And locking a person like this up, whether he's mentally ill or not mentally ill, it would clearly seem to violate the Constitution and state law.
Do we need to revamp an intake system and how we're dealing?
I think we need to deal better with the fact that we have placed the entire burden of dealing with mental illness almost entirely on the correction system, which is not where it belongs, and we don't fund the correction system in a way that would allow them to deal with it in a rational manner. I mean, as Mark Hackle pointed out this week, they contract out those medical services. It's not even jail staff or county staff that's doing it. It's somebody that they can get the lowest bid from. That makes no sense at all, and that's how something like this ends up happening.
And real quick, also coming out that broke last night, State Rep Alberta Tinsley Talabi now is being looked at and investigated in relation to the bribery and kickback scandal at City Hall. It's netted, what, 38 convictions of everyone. She has not been charged with anything yet, but we are now watching this unfold.
Yet another...
I kind of thought it was over, but...
To be clear, it's an informant saying she did this. Yeah. So and she's not been charged.
She has not been charged. I did say that.
I don't know.
But her name
well,
is...
the court documents would suggest there were bribes paid. I mean, that was...
this is what this informant is saying.
Well, I think that's what the investigation revealed. Now, they don't know yet what her role in the solicitation was, but bribes were paid. I mean, it's another legislator gone bad. I don't know what, when we're going to come to the recognition that we've got to change our system here. We are not putting quality people in Lansing.
Well, and again, she has not been charged. She is being investigated in connection with that.
Lots of people get investigated.
Lots of people get investigated. All right, so we'll be watching those things this week.